Hey everyone, we're very excited to have you here today at our webinar to learn about our recently launched clinical trial landscape solution. Designed to address the challenges of today's clinical trial landscape analysis, this AI-powered solution meets the demand for inclusive, unbiased access to global clinical trial data and streamlines the process of uncovering and summarizing valuable insights. We'll give people another moment to join here. So if you want, you can go ahead and grab yourself a cup of coffee or any beverage of your choice, and then we're gonna get started in another second here. You got your drinks ready, Heidi, Eleanor?
All good.
I wouldn't start a webinar without my coffee. Okay, see people joining in here. Welcome, everyone. Okay, so let's get started. Let me introduce our panelists for today's webinar. We have Eléonore Dixon-Roche, Product Manager at Research Solutions, join us, as well as Hiedi Nichols, Customer Success Manager at Research Solutions. And then also let me introduce myself. My name is Julia Heeson, and as you can probably already tell, I'll be moderating our conversation today. Welcome to the webinar, Eléonore and Heidi.
Thank you. Thank you.
So a couple of housekeeping items, just so you know, we'll have dedicated time for all of your questions towards the end. So on the Zoom bar below where it says Q&A, you can just click there. And then as the questions come up, feel free to add them and we'll make sure to address all of them towards the end of the webinar. Also, if you have any other comment, feedback, you need any support, feel free to use the chat, which is enabled. If you want to rewatch any specific part of this webinar later, this is being recorded, so we will be sharing the recording with you afterwards, so you can share it with colleagues or for your own revision. And no worries about any background noise. You're all muted and cameras off, so yeah, no worries about that. Now, just a little bit about Research Solutions, and with that, I'll hand it over. So Research Solutions was founded in 2006, and we streamline how organizations discover, acquire, manage, and create scientific articles and data. We have a suite of innovative products, and we empower researchers worldwide in the way that they are accessing scientific information and utilizing that. Also, last year, we acquired Resolute AI, an advanced search platform aimed at equipping organizations with search, discovery, analysis, and knowledge management tools powered by AI and NLP technologies. And in today's webinar, you'll learn a bit more of some of the core abilities of these acquired AI technologies. With that being said, Eléonore, I'll let you dive right into it.
Yeah. So as you can see, there's a whole suite of products and capabilities now because of these three different companies coming together. So Research Solutions brings the capabilities of access and management. So being able to purchase pretty much like any publications from any source in one singular place and have all of those payments managed within a single system. Resolute brings the capabilities of looking at lots of different types of data. And so we'll have a glimpse of that data, but we cover things like publication abstracts, but mostly patents and grants, clinical trials, which is very applicable today, news, and a bunch of FDA sources. Because we do a lot of metadata enrichment on top of those, we just enable you to be able to filter and analyze that content in a pretty unique way. And then we also have capability to look at internal documents, say from a SharePoint. So we would ingest that content. We do exactly the same metadata type of enrichment, and you can search across all of those. Cite, right at the in blue, right below Discover, brings a unique way to look at publications, and that's specifically to look at citation analysis. So whether the citations are supporting, neutral, or contrasting. It gives you a different way to look and have more insights into how those publications are being referenced. Is it foundational research? Is it new? Is it talking about the methodology? Or is it supporting the conclusions? So that's a lot of the products that we have. And then Heidi, if you want to go to the next screen. Yeah, so what we'll be focusing today is really made possible because we do federated search. For anyone that doesn't know, so federated search just means that you're searching across a bunch of different sources all at once. The huge benefit to this means that you can create one single search strategy. So that means you can come up with your own rules and terms and then do one search and you get all of the results across clinical trials, publications, and a lot more. And specifically, in this instance, we're focusing on clinical trials, so clinical trials and publications alone. This type of search, so if you want to go to the next slide, Heidi, brings a whole load of benefits, which means that you're searching across everything. You can then analyze it. Like I mentioned, we add that metadata, which means that you can look at all of those different all the data in like different types of visualizations. So you can look at it heat maps, interactive heat maps, and drill down further that way, stacked bar charts, Sankey diagrams, and the like. It really allows you to just make sense of the data. And that's really the thing that's important. The federated search piece, that is just a tool that enables you to get the data that you're interested in. But once you have that data, you need to make sense of it. If you don't understand it, it doesn't really have any meaning, you can't share it, can't make decisions upon it, you can't take action. We also allow the ability to export, which then you could also import into any of your visualization tools, say, for example, like even like Tableau or Power BI or whatever you have in-house. And so just to give you a sense of the type of data sets that we have, this is a list of all of the data sets that we have. And one of the things I do want to call out, which could be interesting from a clinical trials point of view, but we're not going to discuss it a whole lot, is technology transfer opportunities, which is mentioned right in the bottom corner on the right-hand side. This is really just looking at any type of new technology that is available for licensing. So when we're thinking about, say, clinical trials and any new clinical trials, trying to look at different new methodologies or design systems, maybe there are new types of licensing opportunities that would help bring that in-house. So before I hand it off to Heidi, the last thing I'm going to cover is the thing that everyone's aware of is the never-ending increasing amount of information that's just being put out, whether it's public domain or internally. But like I mentioned before, so just because we have a lot more information, we need to be able to make sense of it. We need to be able to filter down, need to be able to actually bring out the stuff that matters, that's going to get us to be able to take action and make decisions. And really, this is where metadata shines. Like metadata is not maybe the coolest thing in the world, but it's the thing that allows you to be able to find, filter, and analyze. So I've said that a lot, but the more data that we have access to means the more data that we need to be able to make sense of and filter out all of the garbage, because there is a lot of garbage data, to be able to focus on the quality insights that we can actually make sense of. So with that, I'll hand it over to Heidi.
Awesome. Julie, I think we have our poll first, so I'll hand it over to you.
Yes, thank you. So I'm pulling up a poll here. We'd just love to know everybody who's joining today, which of these apply to you. So you should be able to see this right now. So basically your options are, how do you share clinical trial insights with your team? Option A, we generate in-depth reports detailing trial activity. B, we share Excel files with lists of trials, PLS, etc. C, I pass along information, for example, links, publications, as I come across it via email or Teams. D is I don't, and E is other. And if it's other, please let us know in the chat what that looks like. Always good to know how you're, managing all this inside with your team right now. Okay, see if people are filling it out. I'll give you another moment here. Okay, let's look at the results. Okay. Interesting. Seems like passing along information as it comes along happens quite a lot. Not sharing it. And the other, if you'd like to share it in the chat, feel free to do so. If not, that's fine as well.
This is going to lead in really well, I think, to our next slide here. So, everyone, I think, does share information differently, but in some capacity, some shape or form, clinical trial landscape can be really helpful for informing various types of decisions throughout the development process. So, I think both, of course, clinical teams and clinical research teams can benefit from this type of data. but there are commercial teams, I think, that benefit as well, but just might have a different interpretation or look for different types of insights from that information. So, obviously, being that it can serve many different purposes, I do feel it is a really helpful component of research that can benefit many teams. Again, whether or not you're creating these in-depth reports, I'm sure there are dedicated teams in-house that do that type of activity, but in some capacity, you might be using this clinical trial information on a day-to-day basis. So systematically reviewing clinical trials, including completed, ongoing, planned studies as well, can help you understand a variety of different aspects. So, of course, there's needing to understand what's important to plan successful clinical trials. Also, we can look at even terminated or failed studies to understand mistakes that have been made in the past that you could potentially avoid. So many different ways we could leverage that type of historical data for ongoing and recruiting studies, sort of that active landscape, knowing just where the competition is potentially recruiting in the same patient populations or geographies, but also understanding what therapies that they are developing, also how safe and effective their products are, and of course, how close they are to actually commercializing those products. So again, from both a clinical and commercial perspective, whether you're creating formalized reports or not, some of this data can be really insightful and help you make more informed decisions. All right, go to the next slide here. I do want to discuss some of the challenges in clinical trial landscaping and also some of the problems that here at Research Solutions we're trying to solve. So of course there is a lot of data that's available today. If you didn't know, there are now over 491,000 clinical trials registered globally. That's as of April 15th of this year. To compare, in 2000 there were just 2,119. So not only is there a variety of other challenges, but just the sheer amount of information that's available today makes it difficult to make sure that your landscaping is comprehensive and thorough. Some of the other challenges I do want to talk about here include just the diversity and heterogeneity of trials. So they can vary significantly in terms of the design, the population that's being recruited or treated, also the endpoints that are being examined, and also other methodologies, including treatment plans, things of that nature. So this diversity, of course, does make it difficult to compare and synthesize a large amount of data from these different types of trials. And of course, to infer meaning from all the information that's available from those studies. Also, the availability of data, the quality of that data, a lot of this does come down to the results that are reported or lack thereof. So it can be challenging to actually find some of the published results, but also to, especially when you're looking at things like industry-sponsored studies, a lot of that data is simply not published in a timely manner. So it does make it difficult to find not just the trial data that you're interested in, but also the published results from those studies. There are, of course, a variety of regulatory and ethical considerations. These, of course, are always evolving as changes take place in the regulatory, FDA, different agencies. And it is, again, really hard to make sense of that information when this landscape is always changing. So this obviously does vary from country to country or region, and we obviously want to ensure that we can navigate these changes to make sure that you're in compliance here. There also are diverse stakeholders and interests involved. So kind of as I alluded to before, clinical trial landscapes do involve all these different stakeholders, including researchers, clinicians, regulators, industry sponsors, and then also even patient advocacy groups. So all of these stakeholders will have different ways of interpreting data or different endpoints, data points that they might be interested in extracting from this information. And all of that determines how the data is compiled or synthesized. And then there is resource intensity. So conducting these comprehensive clinical trial landscapes does require a significant amount of time. One, because of all the data that is available today, but also does take expertise and resources to extract it, to compile it, and then to make meaning out of it. So these are some of the challenges that, again, here at Research Solutions, we are trying to tackle to increase the efficiency of clinical trial landscaping. So as I mentioned before, we have developed a clinical trial landscape solution that does simplify this process of analyzing a large amount of clinical trial data. So some of the things that we are doing to help tackle this problem include applying consistent structure and metadata to these documents, as Eléonore summarized earlier in the webinar. So this does include standardizing the structure of any trial record that comes in, and as well as enriching the metadata of that record with our tagging and categorization process. We use natural language processing to apply consistent tags to all the documents, whether publications, clinical trials, even patents, and those tech transfer opportunities. So there you have that consistent structure applied across these documents to help actually tell a story of all the information you're researching. We do have over 700,000 clinical trials globally. This includes information not only from ClinicalTrials.gov, which of course is a resource I think almost everybody is using today for clinical trial information, but we also do integrate registries from WHO as well, which really does give us global comprehensive coverage. And then, of course, we do link trials to their publications where available as well. This way, we are reducing the time it takes to actually find the results that you need from those studies to determine, again, whether it was safe, effective, or overall if that trial was a success, or just other insights that potentially were gleaned from that trial. So that sort of takes place on the back end here, but our clinical trial landscape module will then utilize generative AI to summarize all these key data points together into a report that will help you just increase the efficiency of accessing your trial information, but also understanding the outcomes, the patients that were treated, any challenges that frequently come up in the landscape. Also just helps us quickly make sense of a large amount of data. So anyone can go to ClinicalTrials.gov and kind of extract this functional list of clinical trials. But when you're dealing with 50 to 100 or potentially more clinical trials, it really is difficult to understand what the trends are, what the commonalities are, or differences between the different study designs. So that's really where something like our clinical trial landscape will help to save time and extract some of those insights at a faster rate. It'll also help to make sure you're just keeping tabs on different competitors, their investments and development initiatives. Again, accessing things like your clinical trial results in a timely manner, and also evaluating the safety and efficacy of an intervention or technology. And then to show you a preview of what this looks like, we will get into a demo here very shortly. But basically, we're taking this functional list of results, which does exist in Resolute AI today in our foundation product, but we're taking this data and aggregating it into an easy to understand report, sort of pulling out the main data points that are of interest, will help inform what's actually happening today, as well as completed studies, summaries of trial descriptions, so you can quickly understand what patient populations are being treated, what the design of the study looks like from a high level, but also summarizing any published results that have come out of those studies as well. So again, hopefully you can see just from this slide here, really what the aim of this clinical trial landscape solution is intended to do, to take this massive amounts of functional data that typically comes in like an Excel file or a list format, and importing it into a report here. Okay, so hopefully that leads us here into the demo and sets us up for success. So I'm going to stop sharing my slides here, and I'll take you into the Resolute AI platform. So the clinical trial landscape solution here, as you'll see, we do have some customization capabilities. Again, we are anticipating that there might be a few different ways you want to analyze your landscape or frame the insights. And that way we can also customize the output of the report here. And of course, it will focus on the specific data you're interested in as well. So this is a wizard, which will prompt you to take a few different steps to create your report. We did this for a few reasons. One, we wanted to give you control over the outcome of the report, basically by having you choose which sources or clinical trials, in this case, you want to include as sources. So this will give you the option to influence the resulting report, but also introduce some bias as well, which in some cases with GPT, I think is beneficial. But it also does give you insight into how the information is being synthesized and summarized. So we, of course, can take step by step here. We can ensure that, perhaps you're interested in using just trials intended for treatment or maybe for diagnosis. So you can use our various filtering capabilities to really fine-tune the outcome of the report. So I'll take you step by step here, and I do have a couple examples prepared. But as you'll see, we can use one or more of the criteria defined here. So let's say, for example, you wanted to evaluate a given competitor or another sponsor. You can enter that sponsor here in by name. You could also potentially combine this with a condition or disease. So let's say like Pfizer, for example, you might be interested in just looking at one part of their portfolio because obviously they do participate in many different therapy areas. So you can, of course, combine these together as well. You could also potentially use this to evaluate the experience of a given principal investigator. So you could enter that investigator in here by name, just to get an understanding of what types of studies they typically participate in, and what therapies they might have experience in as well, and also what their active trial experience looks like today. So that is one way we could also use this clinical trial landscape. We also can import specific clinical trial IDs. So if you wanted to use a list of trials that you've already identified and then summarize them into a report, we can use that functionality here. The ones I tend to use most often, just in my experience, are the intervention and treatment ones, as well as condition and disease. So again, you might be interested in evaluating the safety and efficacy of a particular drug, or just seeing how it's being studied and for which indications today. Or again, looking at a specific indication or disease to see what that landscape looks like, and then any resulting information about the treatments that are included in as well. And of course, we do have a catch-all. We have an all fields here if there is, for example, something that doesn't quite fit within these criteria. So I was working with a customer yesterday who was interested in actually looking at how green tea affects specifically glucose levels. So we were able to use that here in combination with the intervention treatment, really to target those specific types of studies. In this case, let's look at a condition or disease. I'm going to use NAFLD here to get started. So this is what I want to focus my report on. I think give me 1 second here. I think I had some pre-existing criteria entered in as I was getting ready for the webinar today. So let's try this again. Okay, something is wrong. As you can see, so I do already have filters applied here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to remove those. So my apologies there. I should have done that before, but that's why we are getting 0 results. Okay, so for NAFLD, we do have 463 clinical trials. So again, that is a lot of data to try to make sense of here. So what we do want to prompt you to do is to get down to 200 or fewer results. One, to make your report focused on something pretty specific to you and also yield more in-depth results. So it's quite difficult to aggregate, information on a variety of different topics into one meaningful report. So that is one reason why we did that here, but also just to reduce the risk of this being potentially including false positives or things like that. So this is really where you get to introduce the bias into the report. So again, I'm searching just on NAFLD here. I can use a variety of our filters. Again, you can consider this as metadata as well. These are ways that we can potentially narrow down or focus the report on something pretty specific. So I'm going to focus again just on NAFLD, or just the variation non-alcoholic fatty liver disease here. And that helps us get down a little bit closer. But we also have different ways we can filter the search, either on the source of the data. Again, you can see we do have ClinicalTrials.gov as well as the WHO registries here. I can also look at these sponsors. So potentially I want to pick a handful of sponsors here from the list, but I can see actively, who is conducting studies or has conducted a study in this indication. I can also focus this on the design. So again, maybe I'm interested in just the interventional studies rather than the observational studies. So I can now influence or add bias in this sense. And I can even add filters as well by state. So maybe I'm interested in just my phase 1 through 3 trials. I can make these selections here to include those that I might be interested in. I'm going to leave status alone because, again, I'm going to want to look at not just the completed studies to see what published results might be available. Completed studies are more likely to have published results, of course, but also to see potentially what's ongoing and active. So that is a key element there. If you really just want to understand the completed landscape, you can, of course, apply that filter. In this case, I'm going to leave that alone. So this does help me get down to 55 clinical trials. And again, the more specific my search and the more filters I used, the more focused and detailed the end report is going to be. So I'm going to hit next. And what this next step allows me to do is just verify that these results are of interest to me or relevant. I might then take a look at a couple of these and decide, well, that's maybe not quite what I want. And I can, again, add more filters to refine the output. Or if you just want to go ahead and generate the report, you can go ahead and use all 55 results here. So this will include all the 55 matching trials as a source or a reference within the report. And that will be documented, as you'll see here shortly as well. You could also go ahead and just add, individual trials here by making selections. You can spend as much time as you'd like verifying these sources and, again, making sure that they are actually of interest to you. So you do have either option in this case. For ease of use here, I'm just going to go ahead and click Use All 55. If you did make individual selections, you would go ahead and click Next. It's relatively streamlined here. And then it does give you 2 options once you've made those selections. So we can go ahead and create a collection. A collection does help you manage the sources you've selected. You could also come back to the report, add to it later, or refine the sources if you'd like. So it is a way to sort of save the research you've conducted in this case, or we can generate a one-off, which I'm going to do here for you. And then typically within 10 minutes, depending on how many sources you've selected, you'll typically have a report. So again, hopefully you can see just the process of, how quickly we went from identifying which trials were of interest to us, refining the criteria by applying the filters down to, prompting the report here. All of the reports do go to a download section, so you can see that is now in progress. Again, typically this takes about 5 to 10 minutes itself, but the report that it generates will look something like this. So as you'll see, we now have a text file. This is something that can be edited, so there's light formatting that's at play here, since we typically anticipate someone might be interested in updating this or putting it into a format that makes sense for them or that their team is used to seeing. So it does give you just a quick overview of the clinical trials here. We can see a breakdown of the sponsors. It does have our most frequent sponsor from the search here at the top, but it does list them out individually as well. We also see a breakdown of phase and status. So again, we can now see quickly which studies here are active, which ones are recruiting. So that way we can get a sense of what the competitive presence does look like. We can also see a summary of trial descriptions. So again, the point here isn't to call out individual studies to tell you what's happening. I feel you could probably do that within, most clinical trial tools, but this here is really to give you an overarching sense of what these trials as a whole are doing, what they're focusing on, which patients they're going after, and what treatment or intervention looks like today. So we do have a description of those studies. We also do pull out key points here. So you can see we do try to call out what's sort of unique about some of these studies here, or if there is a specific therapy intervention that's being looked at, you'll get a quick sense of what that trial is aimed at. So it does give you a really nice breakdown of those studies here, but also we do summarize any publications from the clinical trials as well. So here you can see some of the publications we're able to summarize for you, again, pulling out key insights or results from that data. You'll see here weight loss and NAFLD improvement, management and treatment NAFLD. So really some helpful insights that otherwise would have been quite hard to aggregate from a list of 55 trials. We also do have a combined results summary. So again, pretty fast in aggregating that data, not just from linking to the publications that are of interest to you or relevant to you, but also actually pulling out what results were published from those studies. And there's also information about the patients that were treated, and what you'll see as well, information on inclusion summary. And then lastly, the references. So again, we are giving you insight into what data actually was considered in the report, what was used to generate these insights. So you were able to, again, through those selections in your search, to identify or select those sources. So really it is, up to you and how you want to generate the report or what insights you're interested in. But ultimately you have control over what data the AI is using to synthesize and summarize your information of interest. So that is an overview of all the clinical trial landscape capabilities. But again, we do have links here to not just the clinical trial posting, in ct.gov as well, but also to any of the publications that are linked there. So yeah, hopefully that gives you an idea of just some of the problems or the challenges we're trying to tackle here at Research Solutions, identifying areas where potentially it takes a lot of manual work, analysis, not just to find information of interest, but really to make sense of it all, to tell a story, and to share it with your teams as well. Okay, and that concludes the demo part. So Julia, I will hand it back to you.
Yes, thank you. And I see we got a first few questions here already. Bear with us just another moment. I want to call out two short things, and then we'll get right into the live Q&A. So Heidi, if you wouldn't mind going back to the slides, I'd like to call out something that Eléonore mentioned at the beginning, which is the question of federated search. And if you're interested in learning more about federated search, what is it? And then why is it helpful and useful for you in your in the sciences? We have that webinar coming up next week. I'm adding a link in the chat right now if you want to head over there. You'll see all the webinars, but you'll also find that specific sign up link. And then also we have another webinar series going on about reference management and how you can collaborate as a team. So if that sounds interesting as well, under that same link, I'd love to see you on either of those webinars. And then on the next slide, if you like what you saw today and that clinical trial landscape that Heidi just showcased, that's something you want to learn more about, I can definitely encourage you to head over to the next link that I'm adding in the chat right now. You can ask us some more specific questions. You can see it in action again for a specific use case, invite more people on the call, or even try it out yourself. So definitely head over there and ask us about the clinical trial landscape. Okay, with that being said, let's dive into the questions. The first one is, I think for you, Heidi, can you update an already run report with additional criteria, or do you need to run a new report with the additional parameters or filters that you set?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. So there's a couple of reasons why we did set it up this way. I mentioned the collections part of it, where you're sort of aggregating different sources together through that wizard that I showed you. So the collection does allow you to go back and add additional sources later, but you would have to then rerun the report. So again, that part does take about 5 to 10 minutes generally. I think, you could dedicate more time, of course, to selecting the sources, to verifying that they're all relevant or meaningful. So that part can vary in terms of time, but you would then have to, rerun the report to include any additional insights from other, sources or references you might have added. So, but of course, there's the benefit as well is, let's say, there was something that some insight that you had yourself or some information you knew because of some expertise that you have, you can always add those live to that text file as well, just because it is an easy to edit and easy to update file. So, Eléonore, anything you would add to that?
Yeah, so we also have the concept of just like being able to like save a search. And so say you've spent a lot of time coming up with a search query strategy that you're very happy with, and you just want to rerun it like once a week, once a month, once a quarter. You could just add like a time frame to that, and then all of those results that you get from that time frame, you can just run a report on those. And so essentially you just have like updating reports. The reports, as you saw, like because they're a Word doc, they're not live. Like that's kind of the point. So that because we did our own like discovery and research, and a lot of people is like you create your own reports, you write them, want to be able to edit them, want to be able to put your own formatting, your own spin on them basically, and add in, like Heidi was mentioning, your own expertise and your own knowledge, like stuff that actually may not be available in the public domain. So the goal here is to create a really, really solid first draft. And as you get more data, you can just keep rerunning it. And you get like maybe like smaller, but very much more refined reports. During Heidi's demo, like she showed that we're trying to get it down to like a pretty low number. And the reason for that is like, if you're looking at a very, very broad concept, it's really hard to, you're going to go one way or the other. Either you get something super, super generalized, it's going to be pretty short, it's not really that useful, giving you that many insights. Or the other route is it would create an enormous amount of content that is almost pointless, because now you have to read through that and make sense of that, which is just as almost just as long as if you had just read it through yourself. And so it's part of it is just making sure you're really looking at the stuff you're actually interested in, and not including the stuff that you would weed out usually during your like search and analysis process.
Amazing. Thank you so much both for answering that. Great question. The next question is, how does your coverage differ from ClinicalTrials.gov?
Yeah, that one comes up a lot. I'm happy to take it. So ClinicalTrials.gov is, of course, a great resource for information on clinical trials, at least the ones that are taking place in the United States. However, it does not encompass everything. So there are about 200,000 or more trials that we actually have in Resolute AI that are not found in ClinicalTrials.gov. So that's why, oftentimes, whether it's publications, whether it's information on patents, oftentimes you do have to use more than one source of data to make sure that your analysis and research is comprehensive. So we are covering not only ClinicalTrials.gov, we have trials sourced from all of the WHO registries as well. So that does give us over 700,000 clinical trials today that we've captured. But also we do enrich any data from the various registries together. So of course, we have a deduplication process. So if there's a posting from ClinicalTrials.gov for a trial, but there's also a posting for the same trial in one of the WHO registries, we do aggregate them together. So we do this process of enrichment. And then, of course, there's our metadata enrichment as well through things like our tagging and categorization capabilities. So this just gives us the ability to, one, use all the metadata we have to filter and search for more specific or relevant clinical trials in Resolute AI, but also to potentially identify relationships between clinical trials or other types of data that we aggregate into Resolute AI as well. So a few different, differences there, not even touching on the generative AI component, which ClinicalTrials.gov does not offer. only really that functional list of clinical trials.
Amazing. Thank you. Awesome. One more question I see here. Of course, just as a call out, if any other questions come up, feel free to add them right now. How do we ensure that there are no hallucinations?
Good question. Eléonore, do you want to take that one?
Yeah. So in order to generate a report, if anyone's used ChatGPT or Gemini or anything similar, you have to do a prompt. And we have our own prompt, very, very, very long prompt, but it's still just a prompt essentially. And there is a lot of like, do not include anything that is not being given to you specifically as a reference, which means that there is some information where it's like, it will not add in fluff just if we don't have it. So it's a lot of just on the back end, making sure we don't include anything that is not specifically being handed over. And that includes in, say we were looking at just the clinical trials database as a whole, and you have a subset of references, it's only looking at that subset of references. It's not even going back to the larger subset of clinical trials and getting information from there, or God forbid, outside of that. It's really just what you're giving it. So hopefully summarizing it in a way that as close to as hopefully you would summarize it anyway, bar your language style.
Great. Thank you. Yes, good question. Good questions today. Awesome. Well, it looks like we've got all the questions that came up right now covered. Thank you so much for answering those questions, Eléonore and Hiedi, and for showcasing the product. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. We hope that you found value in learning about this new solution, which we're very excited about. And I'd love to see you next week on the Federated Search webinar. So head over to that link and sign up, and then talk soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.